Hello students, in today's video, let us learn about Davisson and Germer's experiment. So in this experiment, they proved the de Broglie's hypothesis, that is, the electrons are actually behaving like waves of wavelength lambda given by h by p. So this is the experimental verification of de Broglie's hypothesis. The so-called existing hypothesis of wave-particle duality, in which a particle can behave like a wave and a wave like a particle. So this experiment actually proved that the particles can behave like waves. The de Broglie's hypothesis of matter waves. So let us understand this experiment in a detailed manner. Here, in this experiment, first a beam of electrons was produced from a filament to which a voltage was applied. So this filament will be continuously emitting a supply of electrons. These electrons are accelerated through a voltage V, so that the electrons will have an energy of Q into V or E into V. E is the charge of the electron. And these electrons are finally made to collide with a nickel crystal. This crystal is nickel, and on collision with this crystal, these particles, these electrons will get scattered in different directions. An electron detector was used to measure the intensity of electrons in various angles, in various directions. So this detector is movable, just like your spectrometer, the telescope of your spectrometer. This can be moved to different angles, and the intensity of electrons can be studied in different directions. So in this experiment, such a study was made. So the initial setup is the electron gun, where electrons are produced. Then it is passed through aluminum diaphragms and aluminum cylinders, so that we can focus this electron beam. Finally, this focused electron beam is made to a sufficient energy by passing through a suitable voltage, and it is allowed to hit on a crystal and allowed to scatter in different directions. Now, after this experiment, the observations that they obtained are, so these are the graphical representations of various results. So these graphs indicate the electron intensity for different voltages and different angles. So as you see here, for 40 voltage, 44 voltage, different voltage. These voltage correspond to the voltage that was applied to accelerate this electron until the nickel crystal. Then these individual graphs, so suppose in the case of a 48 voltage, you see a curve. This curve actually plots the relation between angle and the intensity of the electrons. So as you can see here, here is an angle phi. Phi is the angle between the incident beam of electrons and the scattered beam of electrons. So as you move this detector, you can measure the electron density for various angles. So if you move this detector to here, then the angle phi will be different. So such a study was made, and the obtained graphs are different for different voltages and different angles. So let us briefly understand the main points obtained from these observations. The graph remains fairly smooth till the accelerating voltage becomes 44 volt when a bump appears in the curve. So as you can see, at 40 voltage the graph is somewhat smooth, but at 44 voltage we see a bump in the graph. As the accelerating voltage is increased, the length of the bump increases. So you can see at 48 voltage the bump is even more prominent. At 54 voltage the bump is more prominent, and later the size of the bump decreases and the curve becomes smooth. The bump becomes most prominent in the curve for 54 voltage of volt electrons at phi equal to 50 degree. So as I have said, this angle, so this represents the beam of electrons, and this is the scattering angle. So 50 degree angle and 54 voltage gives you the maximum intensity of electrons. As the accelerating voltage is further increased, the bump decreases in length and finally disappears at 68 voltage. So these are the observations that was made in the Davisson-Germer experiment, the setup which we have seen in this diagram. Now, in order to scientifically explain these results, these observations, the scientists try to assume various different aspects, various different theoretical provisions. So, through the explanation for this Davisson-Germer experiment, the scientists were able to underline that the de Broglie's hypothesis and matter waves are true. So, let us try to understand the theoretical background of this observation. So, for that, first we need to understand a little bit about wave diffraction in a crystal. So, in a crystal, we know the atoms are arranged periodically. So, here this blue dots represent the atoms in a crystal. This is the lattice structure of a crystal. Now, if we allow a wave to fall on this crystal and to get scattered in different directions, a process that we call diffraction, along some direction and for some wavelength, we will get maximum intensity. For certain wavelengths lambda and for certain angles theta. So this process in which in certain directions we get maximum amplitude or maximum intensity, and in certain other directions and certain other lambda we get no intensity at all. Such a process is the diffraction process. And one scientist called Bragg studied this diffraction of waves from crystal, and he proved that the diffraction from a crystal follows an equation called Bragg's equation, given by 2d sin theta equal to n lambda. So this is an equation for wave diffraction in crystal. If this equation is satisfied, that means the scattered wave from a crystal will have maximum intensity. Now, what are the various terms here? Here D represents the interplanar spacing in the crystal. That is the spacing between two planes in the crystal. This theta is called glancing angle. And this glancing angle is the angle between the incident beam and the plane of the crystal. So this angle is theta between the incident beam and the plane in the crystal. Now n is any integer and lambda is the wavelength of the incident wave. So this Bragg's diffraction or wave diffraction is a property shown by waves when they fall on crystal. That means if these waves satisfy this equation, that means if this wave has a particular lambda and a particular theta, and if this equation is perfectly satisfied, then the output is that we will get a very high intense output beam as the scattered beam. So this is the process of diffraction in a crystal. Now, in the earlier study, in the Davisson-Germer experiment, we were sending a lot of electrons onto the nickel crystal, and these electrons were getting scattered in different directions. Now this diffraction, this Bragg's diffraction could actually explain why we got these kinds of graphs. So let us try to understand that. So this is the nickel crystal that we have taken. In a nickel crystal, there is one particular kind of plane that is present whose interplanar spacing is 0.091 nanometer. So this is a very prominent plane where atoms are arranged in a nickel. So we have said that we get maximum intensity at 50-degree angle, right? What was our angle 50 degree? We took the angle between the incident ray and the scattered ray as our angle phi. So if I plot it correctly, if this is the incident electron beam, and if it is getting scattered at this degree, then 50 degrees is the angle between the incident beam and the scattered beam. Now in this case, what is the glancing angle? We defined glancing angle as the angle between the incident beam and the planes of the crystal. So here we have the planes at this position, and if the angle phi is 50 degree, we can calculate that this glancing angle is actually 65 degree, because here we have angle phi is equal to 50 degree. Then this angle theta and this angle theta, that is 2 theta will be 180 minus phi. So theta will be 180 minus phi divided by 2, which is 180 minus 50 divided by 2, which is equal to 65 degree. So you do not have to worry about this angle. Just remember that in the Davisson-Germer experiment, we considered phi, which is 50 degree for maximum intensity, and in the Bragg's diffraction, that angle should be 65 degree, which is the glancing angle. The difference in angle is because of the considerations that we have while defining the angle. Phi is defined in another way and the glancing angle is defined in another way. So what I was trying to mention is that there is a diffraction process in crystal, and we define it as Bragg's diffraction, and there is a Bragg's equation, and if this equation is satisfied, a wave will give maximum intensity. So with this assumption, if theta is equal to 65 degree and d is equal to 0.091 nanometer, then we can calculate at what wavelength we will get the maximum diffraction, the maximum intensity. So that is given by the Bragg's equation, which is 2d sin theta equal to n lambda. We have the value of theta and we have the value of d. D is 0.091 nanometer. Theta is 65 degree, and let us choose n equal to 1, the first order diffraction. So substituting for these values in the equation, Bragg's equation, we get lambda equal to 2 into 0.091 into 10 raised to minus 9 into sin 65, 2d sin theta. So this can be calculated to be equal to 0.165 nanometer. So this means that if any wave of 0.165 nanometer is allowed to fall on the nickel crystal at an angle 65 degree, will give you a bright intense beam. In our case, we were using electrons as the waves, not as waves, electrons as the incident beam, and we also got a very intense beam of electrons. So let us calculate the wavelength of these electrons according to Bragg's equation, and let us try to verify whether these answers matches. So if we calculate the wavelength of the electron wave, which has a kinetic energy given by 54 electron volt into 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19. So how do you calculate that? We know lambda equal to h by root of 2mqv in the case of an electron moving through a voltage V. So it is 6.63 into 10 raised to minus 34 divided by root of 2 into mass is 9.1 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram. Charge of the electron is 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19. The voltage used is 54 voltage. So if you calculate this, you can find this to be equal to 0.166 nanometer. So according to de Broglie's hypothesis, if an electron is propagating through 54 voltage, then it will have a wavelength of 0.166 nanometer. It will behave like a matter wave of 166 nanometer. In the Davisson-Germer experiment, we got a maximum intensity along 50 degree angle, and from that calculation we saw that if the incident beam is a wave of 0.165 nanometer, then Bragg's diffraction is happening there. That means a wave is getting diffracted according to its wave properties. So if you look at these two phenomena at the same time, on the one hand we have this Bragg's diffraction, which is suggesting that a wave should have a wavelength of 0.165 nanometer to have this kind of maximum intensity. And on the other hand, if we calculate the wavelength of the electron passing through the same potential, the wavelength exactly matches with the other wavelength. So this suggests that electrons are actually behaving like a perfect wave that is able to get scattered through a crystal just like any other wave. Normally in the Bragg's diffraction, normally we use different kinds of waves. For example, X-rays are used in Bragg's diffraction and they will give you diffraction intensity at different angles. So in the Davisson-Germer experiment, instead of these X-rays, which are normally considered as a wave, we used electrons and they behaved like a matter waves and they gave us the exact same result as a wave would have given us. So if electron was behaving like a matter particle, this kind of result would not have been obtained by the scientist. So this result, where a particular angle will give you maximum intensity, that is 50 degree and 54 voltage giving us maximum intensity, could be explained only if electrons are considered as waves, as matter waves. And this wavelength exactly matches with the de Broglie's proposal of wavelength by lambda equal to h by p. So we can state that this Davisson-Germer experiment proves de Broglie's hypothesis that electrons or any other particles can exist as matter waves and its wavelength is given by lambda equal to h by p. So de Broglie's hypothesis was just a theoretical proposal which considered the theoretical side alone. There was no experimental evidence, and the Davisson-Germer experiment is the corresponding experimental background or experimental proof for this de Broglie's hypothesis of matter waves. So this is how they proved de Broglie's hypothesis. I hope this portion is clear for you. Thank you.